Claire, did your broke husband walk here? Or did the restaurant start offering charity seating? Bradley Bennett said it loud enough for the waiter to hear, loud enough for the crystal glasses to pause halfway to polished lips, loud enough for Daniel Whitmore to feel every eye at the private table turn toward his shoes. The room was all dark wood, white linen, soft jazz, and steaks priced like car payments, tucked inside one of Boston's old money restaurants where the servers moved like shadows and every laugh sounded expensive. Daniel stood at the doorway holding a small bouquet of white daisies wrapped in brown paper, the kind sold outside a corner market for $12, still damp from the evening mist. His shirt was clean but simple. His jacket was 5 years old. His wedding ring was the only thing on him that shined. Claire rose too quickly from her chair, her face tightening as if someone had pulled a string behind her smile. "Daniel," she said, reaching for his hand before anyone else could speak. "You made it." He looked at her, and for half a second the noise faded. She was wearing the navy dress he loved, the one she called her lucky dress, her blonde hair pinned back with the pearl clip her grandmother had left her. She looked beautiful, but tired in the way people look when they have been defending someone all night before he even arrives. Daniel handed her the flowers. "Happy birthday to your father," he said softly. "And I remembered you said daisies make formal rooms feel less cold." Claire's fingers closed around the paper. Her eyes softened. Then Margaret Bennett gave a small laugh from the end of the table, the kind of laugh that pretended to be polite while cutting skin deep. "Daisies? How sweet. I suppose roses were not in the budget." Robert Bennett did not laugh. He only leaned back in his chair, heavy gold watch flashing under the chandelier, studying Daniel like a man reviewing a bad investment. Around him sat the rest of the Bennett family. Vanessa with her phone face down but camera lens angled too carefully, Aunt Linda whispering behind her wineglass, and Bradley grinning as if he had been waiting all week for Daniel to walk into the trap. "Sit down, Daniel," Robert said. "Not welcome. Not good to see you. Just sit down," like Daniel was a delivery that had arrived late. Daniel pulled out Claire's chair first, waited until she sat, then took the empty seat beside her. The waiter stepped in to offer him a menu, but Bradley waved it away. "No need. He'll probably just have water." A few people chuckled. Claire's hand moved under the table and found Daniel's knee. A quiet apology pressed through trembling fingers. Daniel covered her hand with his. He could have ended it there. One phone call. One name. One signature. The whole room would have changed its posture. But his phone buzzed once in his pocket, and he already knew the message before he looked. Samuel Reed was outside. The real papers were signed. Daniel kept his eyes on the table, on the silver knife reflecting a version of him they all believed was small. Then Robert lifted his glass and smiled at his daughter. "Tonight," he said, "we are going to fix the mistake Claire made when she married beneath herself." The room went still. Claire stopped breathing. Daniel slowly folded his napkin across his lap, calm as a locked door, while the white envelope beside his chair waited like a secret the Bennett family was not ready to read. Claire had heard her father use that tone before, the polished one that made an insult sound like a business decision. It was the voice he used when firing longtime employees right before Christmas, the voice he used when telling a waiter the soup was too cold, the voice he used the night she brought Daniel home for the first time and he asked without blinking, "What exactly does he provide?" Back then, Claire had laughed nervously and said Daniel provided peace. Nobody at the table understood that answer. Nobody wanted to. Daniel had never filled a room the way her family respected. He did not wear custom suits or talk over people or mention stock portfolios before dessert. He drove an old silver Honda with a cracked cup holder, and kept a roll of quarters in the glove compartment for parking meters. He fixed the loose hinge on Claire's classroom cabinet without being asked. He carried grocery bags for their elderly neighbor Mrs. Donnelly even when he was late for work. When Claire lost her teaching position during district budget cuts, Daniel came home with takeout soup and a notebook full of job listings he had printed at the public library, because their home printer had broken again. He sat beside her on the kitchen floor while she cried into his shoulder, not trying to solve her pain too fast, just staying. That was the man her family called nothing. A man who knew the exact sound her key made in the door. A man who left coffee ready before sunrise because she hated speaking before caffeine. A man who once sold the vintage watch his father had given him so Claire could quietly cover a medical bill for one of her students whose mother was too proud to ask for help. He never told anyone. Claire only found out because she saw the empty box in his drawer, and the receipt folded beneath his socks. Across the table, Bradley was still smiling, enjoying the silence he thought Daniel's poverty had created. "Come on, Claire," he said, swirling his drink. "You used to have standards. Remember Evan Palmer?" Now there was a man with a future. Claire's cheeks burned. Evan Palmer had been a banker who corrected her grammar in public and once told her teaching was adorable because it was not a real career. Daniel's hand tightened once around hers, then relaxed. He did not look angry. That almost hurt worse. He looked patient, like a man standing in the rain because someone he loved had not yet found her umbrella. Margaret leaned toward Claire, lowering her voice just enough to pretend kindness. "Sweetheart, love is charming in your 20s. But a marriage needs stability, health insurance, proper home, a husband who does not make your father's friends ask uncomfortable questions." Claire stared at the daisies lying beside her plate. One petal had bent during Daniel's walk from the parking lot. She touched it gently, remembering how he had once driven 30 miles at midnight because she mentioned she missed the smell of ocean air. They had sat on a cold Massachusetts beach wrapped in one blanket, eating gas station muffins, laughing at nothing. He had looked poor to the world that night too. But Claire had felt richer than she ever had inside her parents' mansion. Robert set his glass down with a soft click. "Daniel, tell me something. Are you still between jobs? Or have we invented a more dignified phrase for it?" The table waited. Vanessa's thumb hovered near her phone. Daniel lifted his water, took a slow sip and said, "I am working on something." Bradley barked out a laugh. "That is what broke men call unemployment." Claire pushed her chair back an inch. "Stop it." Her voice came out small, but it was there. Every face turned to her. Robert's expression cooled. "Excuse me." Claire swallowed. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it under the jazz, under the silverware, under every year she had tried to be the daughter they could praise. Daniel turned toward her, not pleading, not warning, just present. She looked at him and remembered the night he whispered, "You do not have to become cruel to survive cruel people." That memory steadied her spine. "I said stop it," Claire repeated louder this time. "You are not talking about a stranger. You are talking about my husband." For the first time that evening, Daniel looked down, and the smallest breath escaped him, almost like relief. But Robert only smiled, thin and disappointed. "Good," he said, reaching beneath his chair for a leather folder. "Then you can prove how much you believe that before dessert." Robert opened the leather folder slowly, enjoying the attention the way some men enjoyed applause. Inside was not one sheet of paper, but a neat stack clipped with silver tabs, every page marked with bright yellow flags where Claire was supposed to sign. The sight of it made her stomach drop. This had not been a birthday dinner. It had been a setup with wine service. "Dad," she whispered. "What is that?" Robert slid the folder across the white tablecloth until it stopped beside her untouched salad. "A clean solution." Margaret folded her hands as if they were discussing seating arrangements for a charity luncheon. "Your father had our attorney prepare it. Nothing dramatic. Just a practical separation agreement, a temporary housing offer, and a financial reset for you." Bradley leaned back, pleased with himself. Translation: little sister, we buy you out of this disaster before he drags you any lower. Daniel did not reach for the folder. He did not even look at it. His eyes stayed on Claire, and that somehow made the moment heavier. She opened the first page with stiff fingers. The words blurred, then sharpened. Petition for dissolution. Property waiver. Confidentiality clause. Family support reinstatement upon compliance. It was all so clean, so legal, so cruel. They had written the end of her marriage before asking whether she still wanted to be in it. "You brought divorce papers to your own birthday dinner?" Claire asked, her voice barely above the music. Robert's jaw tightened. "I brought you away back into your life. This is my life." "No," he said, and the softness left him. "This is rebellion dressed up as romance." A waiter appeared with a silver tray of warm bread, sensed the air at once, and quietly backed away. Daniel noticed. Claire noticed that he noticed. Even now, He was the only person at the table aware of how uncomfortable someone else felt. That was Daniel. Always seeing the person everyone else treated like furniture. Vanessa finally turned her phone over, screen glowing near her napkin. Claire. Nobody is trying to embarrass you. But her smile said the opposite. We just think you deserve someone who can keep up. Claire stared at the folder. Keep up. The phrase scratched at something old inside her. She had spent her whole childhood trying to keep up with the Bennetts. Piano lessons she hated. Summer camps with children who ranked each other by zip code. Holiday photos where her mother retook the picture if Claire's smile looked too ordinary. Then Daniel came along with his quiet apartment, his thrift store bookshelf, his habit of cooking breakfast for dinner when money was tight, and for the first time in her life, Claire did not have to perform being worthy. She simply was. Her hand slid to the small paper-wrapped bouquet. The daisies looked almost foolish beside the crystal and imported wine, but Daniel had remembered. He always remembered the little things no one could brag about. Robert tapped the page with one finger. Sign tonight and we will handle everything. Your student loans. Your lease. A better position at a private academy through one of my contacts. You can start over before this becomes permanent damage. Claire blinked. Permanent damage? Margaret reached for her hand, but Claire pulled back. Sweetheart, people are already talking. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Once. Then twice. In his pocket, Samuel Reed's messages waited like thunder behind a closed door. Daniel could picture him outside the restaurant, gray suit, black briefcase, two attorneys beside him, all of them holding the papers Robert Bennett should have feared more than any scandal. But Daniel stayed still. Not because he needed Claire to suffer. Never that. He needed the truth to arrive in the right order. Love first. Money second. Choice before proof. Bradley pushed a pen across the table. It rolled over the linen and stopped against Claire's plate. Come on, he said. Do not make this uglier than it has to be. Claire picked up the pen. Daniel's breath paused, though no one saw it. Robert's mouth curved in victory. Vanessa lifted her phone a little higher. For one terrible second, the entire Bennett family leaned forward as if watching a contract close. Then Claire looked at Daniel. Not at his old jacket. Not at his tired shoes. Not at the life her family kept calling small. She looked at the man who had sat beside her on the kitchen floor when she felt like nothing. The man who never raised his voice to prove he mattered. The man who had loved her without an audience. Her fingers tightened around the pen. Then she placed it across the divorce papers without signing. No, she said. One word. Clean. Final. The table fell silent, and Daniel finally allowed himself to look at the white envelope beside his chair. Still unopened, still waiting. Claire's answer did not echo. It simply landed small and steady, in the center of the table, and somehow it made every expensive thing in the room feel cheap. Robert stared at her as if she had spoken in a language he had paid for her not to learn. Margaret's lips parted. Bradley's grin collapsed into something colder. Vanessa lowered her phone half an inch, but not enough. Daniel saw that too. He saw everything now. Claire picked up the folder with both hands. For a moment, Daniel thought she might slide it back politely, because Claire had been trained to make even her pain convenient for other people. Instead, she tore the top page once down the middle. The sound was not loud, just paper giving up. Then she tore it again. The yellow signature flags fluttered onto the linen like little warning signs nobody had followed. Claire Elizabeth Bennett, Robert said, his voice sharp with embarrassment. Do not make a scene. She looked around the private room, at the family portraits hanging on the paneled wall, at the waiter frozen near the doorway, at her brother's smirk returning because he still believed shame was stronger than love. You made the scene, she said. You invited my husband here to humiliate him. You prepared legal papers behind my back. You offered to buy me like I was a problem on your balance sheet. Margaret's eyes shone, but not with sorrow. With panic. We are trying to protect you. No, Claire said, and this time her voice did not tremble. You are trying to own me. Daniel's hand moved under the table, but he stopped himself before touching her. This was her moment, not his rescue. He had spent months waiting for the truth to come out, but he had never wanted to steal the strength she found when no one handed it to her. Claire turned to Bradley. And you. You keep calling Daniel broke because that is the only insult you understand. But he has shown up for me more times than this family ever has. Bradley laughed once too loud. Showed up? With what? Flowers from a gas station. Claire lifted the daisies from beside her plate. One bent stem leaned over her finger, fragile but still alive. With this, she said. With the small things. With patience. With loyalty. With a home where I do not have to earn kindness. Robert pushed his chair back. The legs scraped the floor, and the quiet jazz suddenly seemed far away. Enough. If you walk out with him tonight, do not come back asking for help when reality catches up. Daniel finally looked at him. Not angry. Not afraid. Just clear. Robert noticed the change and frowned, as if a shadow had moved behind a locked window. Daniel's phone buzzed a third time. Claire heard it this time. Her eyes flicked toward his pocket, confused, but Daniel only gave her the smallest nod, a silent promise that there was more, but not before she finished choosing herself. Vanessa raised her phone again, whispering, "This is unbelievable." Daniel's gaze shifted to her screen. "Vanessa," he said quietly, speaking her name for the first time all evening. "Put the phone down." The softness of his voice made it worse. It carried no threat, no performance, only certainty. Vanessa hesitated. Bradley scoffed. "Or what? You will send her an invoice." A few nervous laughs broke out, thinner now. Daniel reached for the dinner check lying near Bradley's elbow. The leather booklet was already open. The total circled in blue ink like another insult. Bradley had meant to shove it toward him later. Daniel saw the number. $3,846. He closed it calmly and placed it beside his water glass. "I can cover dinner," he said. Bradley leaned forward, delighted again. "With what, a payment plan?" Robert turned to Claire, voice low and final. "Last chance. Sit down. Apologize. Sign the documents tomorrow in private, and we can pretend tonight was emotional confusion." Claire's face went pale, but she did not sit. She took Daniel's hand in front of all of them. "I already made my choice." That was when Daniel stood. Slow. Unhurried. The room seemed to tighten around him. He picked up the white envelope from beside his chair, brushed one torn yellow flag off the tablecloth, and set the envelope in front of Robert. "Then it is time," Daniel said, "for everyone else to make theirs." Robert looked at the envelope as if Daniel had placed a dirty napkin in front of him. He did not touch it. Pride held his fingers still, but curiosity pulled his eyes down. The paper was thick, white, unmarked except for his name written in Daniel's quiet handwriting. Robert Bennett. Not Dad. Not Mr. Bennett. Just the name of a man who had spent all evening measuring another man, and never once noticed he was standing on a scale himself. "What is this supposed to be?" Robert asked. Daniel remained standing, one hand resting lightly on the back of Claire's chair. "Information you should have read before tonight." Bradley snorted and reached for the envelope. "Great." He brought a resume. Daniel's hand moved first, not grabbing, not aggressive, simply pressing two fingers on top of the envelope before Bradley could take it. The room went silent again. "That is not for you," Daniel said. Bradley's face reddened. "You are in my family's private room." "No," Daniel said. "I am in my wife's private humiliation, and it is ending." Claire looked up at him, stunned by the quiet force in his voice. For years, she had known Daniel as gentle. Gentle when he washed dishes because she fell asleep grading papers. Gentle when he left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror before her interviews. Gentle when he listened to her mother criticize their apartment and still offered her coffee. But this was different. This was not anger. This was authority stripped of arrogance. Robert finally picked up the envelope and opened it with a sharp tear at the corner. Daniel heard the sound and thought of his father's study in Vermont, the smell of old books and cedarwood, the night his father had placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Son, money will introduce you to everyone, but poverty, even borrowed poverty, will introduce you to the truth." Daniel had hated that lesson when he was younger. He hated it more after marrying Claire, because pretending to be ordinary had not just revealed strangers. It had revealed her family. Robert slid out the first page. His eyes moved once across the heading, then stopped. Bennett Commercial Holdings, Emergency Debt Purchase Agreement. His brows drew together. "Where did you get this?" Margaret leaned over. "Robert." Daniel did not answer yet. He glanced toward the doorway, where the waiter still stood uncertainly. "Would you please give us a few minutes?" he asked. The waiter nodded with visible relief and stepped out. Even that small courtesy made Claire's chest ache. Daniel could be dismantling her family, and still he made room for a stranger's dignity. Bradley stood, reaching for the paper. "Let me see that." Robert held it away. His face had lost some color now. Vanessa's phone was flat on the table, forgotten for the first time all night. Robert read the second page, then the third. His lips tightened. "This is confidential company material." "It was," Daniel said, "until the lender sold the position." "Sold it to whom?" Robert asked, though some part of him already knew the answer and hated it. Daniel's phone buzzed once more. This time he removed it from his pocket and looked at the screen. Samuel Reed at the door. Claire saw the name. She knew it vaguely from late-night calls Daniel always took in the hallway, from envelopes that arrived at their apartment and disappeared into his desk drawer, from the way Daniel sometimes said, "Samuel needs a signature," and then changed the subject. Her fingers went cold around the daisies. Daniel typed one word. "Come." Before Robert could ask another question, the private room door opened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside carrying a black leather briefcase, followed by two composed attorneys with sealed folders tucked under their arms. His hair was silver at the temples. His posture belonged to someone who had never once needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. He walked directly to Daniel and stopped at his right side. "Mr. Whitmore," he said. The name settled over the room like a chandelier going dark. Claire turned slowly toward her husband. Daniel did not look away from her. Samuel placed the briefcase on the table, opened it, and removed 3 bound sets of documents. "The real papers are ready for your signature," he said. Bradley blinked. "Mr. What?" Samuel looked at him with professional calm. "Daniel Whitmore, principal owner of Whitmore Holdings, majority purchaser of Bennett Commercial Holdings debt, and sole trustee of the Whitmore Family Foundation." No one laughed. Not Bradley. Not Vanessa. Not Margaret. Robert stared at Daniel as if the old jacket, the simple shirt, the $12 daisies, and the quiet man beside his daughter had rearranged themselves into a language he suddenly could not read. Claire's hand slipped from Daniel's, not in rejection but in shock. "Daniel," she whispered. His voice softened only for her. "I wanted to tell you. But not before you knew they were wrong without needing proof." Claire felt the room tilt, though nothing moved except the paper spreading across the table like a second tablecloth made of truth. Whitmore Holdings. Majority purchaser. Sole trustee. The words did not fit the man she knew, the man who clipped coupons beside her on Sunday mornings and argued that homemade pancakes tasted better when they were slightly uneven. Her first feeling was not anger. It was disbelief, followed by something tender and bruised. Daniel had been carrying a whole life beside her, silent, careful, waiting. Robert found his voice first because men like Robert always mistook speaking first for winning. "This is absurd." He lifted the debt agreement in one stiff hand. "Whitmore Holdings is a private investment firm. Daniel has nothing to do with." Samuel opened a folder and slid a notarized certificate across the table. "Daniel Whitmore is the controlling owner. The company's privacy structure is intentional and fully documented." Bradley stared at the page, his face losing its color in slow degrees. No, that cannot be right. He drives a Honda." Daniel almost smiled, but there was no joy in it. "It gets good mileage." Vanessa lowered her eyes. Margaret pressed a hand against her necklace as though pearls could steady her. Robert flipped through another document, faster now, searching for an error he could turn into power. "You bought our lender position?" "I bought the debt your company tried to hide," Daniel said. "The short-term loans. The emergency bridge notes. The line of credit secured through questionable personal guarantees." Claire blinked. "Personal guarantees?" The attorneys exchanged a brief look. Samuel's expression softened slightly before he turned a page toward her. "Mrs. Whitmore, some of the liability paperwork was connected to your name." The air left Claire's lungs. "My name?" Robert slammed the folder shut, not violently, but hard enough to make the silverware jump. "That was internal restructuring." Daniel looked at him then, and the gentleness finally thinned into steel. You used your daughter's signature authority from an old family trust account to support failing company debt. She did not understand what she was signing. You told her it was routine estate paperwork. Claire remembered it at once. 6 months earlier, her father had sent a courier to her school with a folder and a note. Just sign where marked sweetheart. Cleaning up family records. She had signed in the teacher's lounge between grading spelling quizzes and calling a parent about a missing lunchbox. Her hand rose to her mouth. Dad, she whispered. Robert would not look at her. It was temporary. It was reckless, Daniel said. And it could have damaged her credit, her career, and her future. Bradley pushed his chair back, panic replacing arrogance. You have no idea what it takes to run a company. Daniel turned to him. I know exactly what it takes. Takes responsibility. Something this table has been avoiding all night. Samuel placed the second set of papers in front of Daniel. These documents remove Claire Whitmore from all disputed liability. Upon signature, the debt remains with the corporate entity and the parties who authorized the misuse. Margaret's face crumpled, but still she whispered, Daniel, surely we can handle this privately. We are family. Claire flinched at that word. Family. The same word they had used like a leash. Daniel looked at Claire, not at Margaret. Do you want me to continue? He asked. The question was quiet, but it changed everything. After all the men at this table had decided for her, priced her, cornered her, Daniel was the first to ask. Claire lowered her hand from her mouth. Her eyes were wet but clear. Yes, she said. I want the truth. Daniel nodded once. Samuel opened the third folder. The final document concerns the Whitmore Family Foundation. Robert frowned, confused by the shift. Daniel picked up the white envelope he had set before him earlier and removed the last page inside. My mother built that foundation before she died, he said. She believed money should move toward people who were ignored by rooms like this one. Claire stared at him, barely breathing. Daniel placed the paper beside the daisies. Tonight, I was going to ask you to become its executive director. Not because you are my wife. Because I have watched you spend your life seeing people nobody else notices. Claire's tears slipped free. Around them, the Bennett family sat silent, stripped of every insult they had brought to the table. Daniel signed the first page. Then the second, his pen moving with calm finality. Samuel, he said. Begin the corrections. Samuel closed the folder. Already prepared, Mr. Whitmore. Daniel turned back to Robert. You offered Claire a price to leave me. I am offering her the truth, her freedom from your mistakes, and the work she was always meant to do. That is the difference between control and love. Robert Bennett had spent his life believing every room had a head, and that he belonged at it. But now he sat beneath the chandelier in his own birthday dinner, staring at papers that turned his authority into ink and consequence. For the first time all evening, nobody was waiting for him to speak. They were waiting for Claire. Daniel stepped back from the table just enough to make that clear. He did not take the chair at the center. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood beside his wife and let the silence show everyone where the power had moved. Claire wiped her cheeks with the edge of her napkin, then looked at Samuel. If Daniel signs those papers, am I really removed from the debt? Samuel nodded. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. Your name will be cleared from every disputed guarantee. We have already prepared notices to the lenders, the board, and the proper legal representatives. And my father's company, she asked. Robert's face tightened at the word father, as if it now carried evidence. Samuel looked to Daniel, but Daniel looked to Claire. You can answer her, Daniel said. Samuel opened the first folder again. Bennett Commercial Holdings will survive only under supervised restructuring. Any executive involved in the misuse of family trust authority will be removed from financial control while the review is conducted. Bradley stood so quickly his napkin fell to the floor. You cannot just walk in here and take our company. Daniel turned to him. I did not take it. Your decisions put it on the market. I only made sure Claire was not buried under the paperwork when it collapsed. Vanessa whispered. This is insane. But her voice had lost its teeth. Margaret reached toward Claire again, slower this time. Sweetheart, listen to me. Your father made mistakes, yes, but he was protecting the family name. Claire looked at her mother's hand and did not take it. What about my name? Margaret blinked. Claire's voice broke then steadied. You all cared so much about Bennett. About reputation. About what people at the club would say. But you put my signature on something I did not understand. You watched me defend my marriage while you had already used me like collateral. Robert finally looked up. I never meant for you to be harmed. But you were willing for Daniel to be humiliated, Claire said. You planned that part carefully. The words went through the table cleaner than any accusation Daniel could have made. Robert had no answer. Bradley tried to reach for anger again, but it slipped out of his hands. Fine, he said. So he is rich. That does not make him better than us. Daniel nodded once. You are right. Money does not make anyone better. Then he looked around the table at the torn divorce papers, the untouched dessert plates, the expensive wine breathing in glasses nobody wanted anymore. But neither does a last name. Neither does a house in Wellesley. Neither does a bank account you use to decide who deserves basic respect. Samuel placed another document in front of Robert. Mr. Bennett, this is a formal notice requiring a public correction of all unauthorized liabilities connected to Mrs. Whitmore. Robert read the first line and swallowed. Public. Yes, Daniel said. The same way you made her shame public at this table. The correction will be public in the places that matter. Lenders. Board members. Legal records. No gossip, no spectacle, just truth. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward her phone. Daniel saw it. And any recording from tonight will be deleted before you leave this room, he added. Not because I am afraid of it. Because Claire deserves privacy after being cornered. Vanessa's thumb moved fast. The screen went dark. Claire turned to Daniel then. Pain and gratitude tangled across her face. You should have told me, she said softly. The room held its breath again. But this time the moment belonged only to them. Daniel's expression changed. The controlled authority faded, and the man from their small kitchen returned. The one who burned toast when he was nervous and apologized to houseplants when he bumped into them. I know, he said. I was afraid that if I told you too early, every choice after that would feel different. I wanted one person in my life who chose me before the name. But I should not have let that secret sit between us. Claire looked at the daisies, then at the foundation papers. I did choose you, she whispered. But now I need to learn the rest of you. Daniel nodded, eyes shining. Then I will spend every day telling you the truth until there is nothing left hidden. Robert opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to bargain. But Claire stood before he could turn remorse into strategy. She picked up the daisies with one hand and Daniel's signed papers with the other. I am leaving now, she said. Not because Daniel can protect me. Because I finally can. Daniel offered his arm, not as a savior but as a husband. Claire took it. Behind them, Samuel gathered the folders, and the Bennett family sat surrounded by all the things money had bought and none of the things it could repair. The hallway outside the private dining room felt colder than the room they had left, but Claire could finally breathe there. The restaurant's main floor continued around them as if nothing had happened. Forks touched plates. A bartender polished a glass. Someone near the window laughed over a birthday candle, unaware that one family had just cracked open 20 feet away. Claire stood beside a framed painting of Boston Harbor, clutching the bent daisies like they were the only proof the night had not swallowed her whole. Daniel stopped a few steps from her, giving her space. That hurt her in a different way because even now, even with everything he had hidden, he still knew not to crowd her pain. Samuel and the attorneys remained near the entrance, quiet as shadows, waiting without staring. How long? Claire asked. Daniel looked at the carpet before answering. Since before we met. She closed her eyes. No. I mean, how long did you know about my name being on those papers? His face tightened. 3 weeks. Claire opened her eyes. The number landed harder than she expected. 3 weeks of him making coffee. 3 weeks of him asking about her classroom. 3 weeks of him sitting across from her at their tiny kitchen table with this storm locked behind his ribs. You let me walk into that room, she said. Daniel swallowed. I did not know they would bring divorce papers. But you knew my father was in trouble. Yes. You knew Samuel was coming. Yes. Her voice softened, which somehow made it worse. And you let me be surprised in front of everyone. Daniel took that without defending himself too quickly. The old Daniel would have reached for her hand. This Daniel kept his hands at his sides because the truth had cost him the right to comfort her immediately. I thought if I revealed everything before you chose, your family would say you stayed because of the money. I thought I was protecting the one honest thing between us. Claire let out a small broken laugh. By being dishonest? He looked at her then, and there was no billionaire in his eyes, no secret owner, no man with attorneys at the door. There was only her husband, frightened by the damage he had done trying not to lose the only love that had ever felt real. Yes, he said. And I was wrong. The answer was so plain that her anger had nowhere dramatic to go. It simply stayed between them, aching. A hostess passed nearby, sensed the tension, and lowered her voice as she guided guests toward another room. Claire watched the woman walk away and remembered all the times Daniel had noticed people like that, people paid to be invisible. That part of him had not been fake. The money had been hidden, but the kindness had not. Do I even know your life? Claire asked. Daniel breathed in slowly. You know my habits. My fears. The way I hate mushrooms but keep trying them because you love them. You know I still talk to my mother when I cannot sleep. You know I keep my father's watch box even though the watch is gone. Claire glanced at him. You sold it. No, he said softly. I put it away. Then I let you believe I sold it because you would not have accepted help for that student if you knew I could afford it. Claire's eyes filled again. But this time the tears were complicated. The lie had been gentle. Still a lie. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small velvet pouch, worn at the edges. He did not open it. My father's watch is in a safe. I should have told you. I should have trusted that your kindness did not need my poverty to stay pure. Claire looked down at the daisies, their paper wrapping damp from her palm. I am angry, she whispered. I know. And embarrassed. I know. And I still love you, which makes me even angrier. A faint, painful smile touched his mouth. I can live with that. As long as you let me earn back the parts one cracked. Behind them, the dining room door opened. Margaret stepped out first, her mascara perfect but her face pale. Robert followed, older somehow, the leather folder pressed to his chest. For 1 second, Claire braced for another performance. But Robert did not look at Daniel. He looked at her. Claire, he said, and the word came out smaller than his pride had ever allowed. Daniel moved half a step aside, leaving father and daughter facing each other without him as a shield. Claire lifted her chin. Robert's mouth worked once before any sound came. I was wrong, he said. Not elegant. Not enough. But real enough to make the hallway go quiet. Claire held the daisies closer and answered. Then start by fixing what you signed. Robert nodded slowly. I will. Daniel watched Claire, not Robert. Because the victory was not that a rich man had been exposed, or that a cruel family had been silenced. The victory was that Claire's voice had finally become the loudest truth in the room. 3 weeks later, the daisies were gone, but Claire kept the brown paper wrapping folded inside the top drawer of her desk at the Whitmore Family Foundation. Her office did not look like power the way her father had taught her to recognize it. No cold marble. No wall of awards. Just sunlight through tall windows, shelves filled with children's books and grant proposals, a chipped mug full of pencils, and a framed note Daniel had left on her first morning there. Build the kind of room you once needed. She read it every day before the work began. The corrections came first. Samuel filed every notice. Robert signed every document. Bennett Commercial Holdings entered supervised restructuring, and 3 executives, including Bradley, were removed from financial control pending review. There was no dramatic downfall splashed across television screens. No public screaming. No spectacle for people to enjoy over coffee. Just quiet accountability, the kind that changed bank records, board minutes, employee protections, and Claire's future. Robert sent a written apology to the lenders, the board, and to his daughter. Claire read hers twice, then placed it in a folder marked boundaries, not forgiveness. That would take longer, and for once, she did not rush herself to make everyone else comfortable. Margaret called every few days, softer now, careful with words she used to throw like coins. Claire answered when she had the strength and let voicemail take the rest. Bradley did not call. Vanessa mailed a handwritten card with 3 sentences and no excuses. Claire appreciated that more than flowers. But the biggest repair happened at home, not in offices or legal records. Daniel told her everything. Slowly, fully. The Vermont house. His mother's foundation. The reason he had hidden the Whitmore name after years of being treated like a walking bank account. The fear that love would turn into calculation the moment wealth entered the room. Claire listened, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes sitting across from him with her arms folded, needing distance while truth found its way back between them. Daniel did not complain. He answered every question, even the ones that made him look small. One night, in their little kitchen they still had not moved out of, Claire found him making pancakes for dinner, the same uneven circles burning at the edges. His father's watch sat on the table in its velvet pouch. He pushed it toward her without ceremony. "No more symbols I do not explain," he said. Claire opened the pouch, touched the old watch, then closed it again. "No more tests," she answered. Daniel nodded. "No more tests." Winter softened into spring. The foundation launched its first new program under Claire's leadership. Emergency grants for teachers buying supplies, meals, coats, and field trip tickets out of their own pockets. She named it the Daisy Fund, and when Daniel saw the logo, a small white flower tucked beside the words, he had to turn away for a second. On opening day, Claire stood in a community center in Worcester, wearing a simple blue dress and no pearls, speaking to a room full of teachers, parents, and volunteers. Daniel stood in the back, not as the hidden billionaire, not as the husband waiting to reveal anything, but as the man who arrived early to stack chairs and stayed late to sweep the floor. When Claire finished, the room applauded, and she looked straight at him. Not at his money. Not at his name. Him. Later that evening, they walked along Boston Harbor with paper cups of coffee warming their hands. The air smelled like salt and rain. Claire leaned against the railing, watching the city lights shake across the water. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out one fresh daisy, slightly bent from being carried too long. She laughed softly. "Still buying the cheap flowers?" "Always," he said. They started a foundation. Claire took it, then looked down at her wedding ring. For a moment she twisted it off and Daniel went still. But she only wiped the band with the edge of her sleeve, the way she had that night outside the restaurant, then slid it back onto her finger with a quiet certainty that did not need witnesses. "I chose you when I thought you had nothing," she said. "Now I am choosing you knowing everything. But this time, Daniel, we build with truth." He covered her hand with his, careful and grateful. "With truth," he promised. Behind them the city kept moving, bright and indifferent, but between them the world felt still. A man once called broke had given his wife papers that freed her, but Claire had given him something no fortune could purchase. She had chosen the person beneath the name, then demanded the honesty worthy of that choice. And in the end, the richest thing Daniel Whitmore owned was not a company, a foundation, or a family legacy. It was the small apartment they returned to that night, the uneven pancakes waiting in the fridge, the bent daisy in a glass of water, and the woman beside him who had turned love from a secret into a home.